Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Mental health activists care about helping the people to no longer have mental health illness or disorders such as depression, schizophrenia, or anxiety. And this is something that we should always remember. So what does the government side of the house mean as significantly allocating most of our researchers to IDCS? It means that most of our researchers, of course, will go into developing the IDCS, but we will also maintain whatever that we have already done. Maybe, for example, we have already done the fifth therapy, we will maintain it, but maybe we will also reduce it. And also, it should be noted that mental health activists is not rich, right? We do not have that much money. Most of our money comes from donations. And this means that there is also another form of researchers that maybe we can utilize as well, which it means in the sense of maybe advocacy, maybe we could advocate towards the disease and so on. And then if there's also a researcher in our mental health activists, we can also utilizing it. So the goal of our self-dose is actually clear. We want to give the most to be able to help these people in the permanent way, and will not give them any more prolonging harm, right? So the problem that are in this, the problem that we can solve and the opposition cannot solve is that, first of all, it should be noted that mental health, where do mental health illness and disorder actually come from? Most of them, or maybe there's some of them also came from the injuries in the brain. Like maybe there's these people having a traumatic incident, or like car accident, or maybe just any kind of visibly damage the brain that actually makes the brain function not as well as the normal people, right? Maybe this will cause them bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, PTSD, and so on and so forth. And this is and also there's also things if depression as well, even though people might feel that it does not come from the brain, but it is also can also come from brain damage, right? Because the depression that has been going around for too long, clinically, and been diagnosed as clinical depression and so on. This depression, when the brain that operates in the depression state, in the depression condition, is different than people that are not depressed, right? Their the hormone may be a bit different. Maybe there's some kind of hormone that they do not produce, and so on and so forth. And when there's a long of time of your brain functioning in that kind of situation, at the end of the day, your brain will change. Your brain will get damaged. Maybe in the kind of hormone will eventually be always cannot be, a certain one cannot be produced, and so on and so forth. This means that the problems that has not been solved in the status quo is the brain problem, right? And TDCS is the one that will tackle this problem in the permanent way, because the other side of the house will only be tackling it in the temporary way that in the end of the day will make it worse, and in the end of the day will also only cause harms. Secondly, why conceptually TDCS is better? First, we must remember that the characteristic of TDCS, it is to be created to improve our brain function, right? It is created to solve the brain damage, to heal brain damage, and this permanent ways is something that's actually better and more making sense for the betterment of individuals, right? Because if we compare it with the conventional treatment that is temporary, what things that we can do? First of all, you maybe can only balance your hormone. Maybe you're being given pills in when you're clinical depression to make some hormone and so on and so forth. And maybe when you're having an anxiety attack, you need to call someone. You need to be reliant to a certain things, right? You need to be reliant when in the end of the day, those things itself cannot solve it clearly, right? Then there's these dangers of being heavily reliant to these things. Maybe, for example, if you are heavily reliant to the medication, you need to buy the medication again and again in order for you to feel as slightly better. You need to go therapy again and again to make you slightly better. And these things is costly actually. These things cost a lot of things, a lot of money, maybe millions and maybe like tens millions and above, especially if you're doing it for a long time, right? And and then when there's a lot of cost towards the financial aspect, these people, first, they can maybe have financial downfall. Maybe in one day they cannot afford it anymore, and then they no longer can be better. Secondly, a lot of people also feel compelled to do it because they can afford it, right? There's a lot of prerequisites to need to be covered. And when you're in a country where the state and the people itself does not care about mental health, you need to do a lot of more to able for people able to get this right. And then there's also the problem with the effectivity of this real temporarily and prolonging things, right? Because first now therapy is something that on only about case, right? It's not it, and it's physical brain chemistry. So no, and when there is the problem is about the physical brain chemistry, talking cannot help it, right? Secondly, medication only can make you reliance because it only stimulates a bit, creates an addiction, and self-love is often hijacking by the corporations. Maybe they commercialize the self-love and maybe going to vacation and so on and so forth. And when you do not do the second thing, you feel like your mental thoughts are not valid, are not less appreciated. And the conclusion of this argument is that we want to help these people permanently and not to mitigate them, right? Because the danger of temporarily and just doing it again, 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 also means that we will keep burning our money. And the danger is that first, there's no certainty that the money will be there tomorrow, right? Maybe today the activists got a lot of money from donation because remember, money mostly come from donations and they can afford this. But what happens when tomorrow does not? And these people that has already been going around to the free therapy, going around to the free medications, or they do not have this. Now they are feeling worse, or maybe they're in the end that's not being good, right? Secondly, if we are throwing our money again and again, and it is not fruitful, there's not any significantly good changes. The donator that's trying to maybe firstly have a hope in our side of the house, and suddenly they're going to see that mental health activist is doing some kind of useless thing, and let's not just donate it, right? The donator will stop, and then donation will no longer be there, and the impact as well, the problem is still there, and it is also worsened for these people, right? So the conclusion is that we want something that is a breakthrough, a permanent one, to make sure that our researchers is secure, right? Our researchers is being used for a good way and more better way, right? And in addition as well, when the researchers, if we are focusing on developing data disease, the researchers will not only come from us, right? Because now the disease is not just for mental health illness, but it's also brain injuries. This means that this is also something that is important to the medical world in a whole. So there are most likely there will be a support for the medical team to also develop this kind of technology. And second, and lastly is about how the accessibility of the disease will be better, right? The thing with this kind of medical technology, medical pattern is that in the end of the day, they will eventually become inherently accessible in the long run, right? Because through their market are demanding for this, especially because this is a problem they can solve the problems. And then when this market is slowly growing, the demand become a lot, and then this kind of technology will be more accessible at the end of the day. Secondly, if they have the money to subsidize the medication therapy, the conventional treatment, medication and therapy in the free way, we can also subsidize these people to join the treatment, right? We can use this money to help them to go to this treatment itself. And lastly, as someone with mental health activities, it is exactly why we are the one who has to pull the funding. We have to allocate our resources and on this kind of technology, maybe on the patent, because without us, the mental health activists, maybe there's also practical one, which means it will become more and more not accessible. So for all these reasons, we are proud to propose this motion.
Thank you so much, the Prime Minister, for their speech. To open the case of opposition, we call on Leader of OP. The floor is yours. Here.
Check. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible. But maybe
Okay,
speak a
prepare.
little louder.
Test. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Okay. Preferred gender pronouns is he, him. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We still use the current context of allocating conventional way, such as giving medication, psychology classes that's very accessible, or even free therapy, right? These methods are already effective to some extent, right? This is the ideal movement that we want as a mental health activist, that giving more bonding, for example, through more classes, for example, or more socialization, right? Government cannot say that this is the additional method because number one, this is type of different things between the TDCS and conventional way, right? But number two, look at the motion that this is significantly focused, meaning you are going to shifting the focus to the research of TDCS in the end of the day, right? So they cannot say this is the additional method. So the stance of opposition to the house, we are going to use the conventional way, but not limited to, we also try to innovate and also evaluate something of conventional, but this part of innovation or even evaluation does not go to direction of TDCS enough there, right? So two responses towards the PM speech. Number one, they're mostly talking about the idea of brain injuries, right? But in the context, right, in the context of this debate, we're talking about something depression, something schizophrenia, for example, or something anxiety, right? Because the problems of mental health activists is to cure and also give them warm, huge heartwarm, for example, to the people or depression, right? We don't merely talk about the brain, but even if yes, but this part of depression or even the cases of anxiety, for example, is not just caused by the brain injury, for example, right? It is, for example, caused by the bullying in the school, for example. Hence, you would be insecure, for example, or anxiety, right? Or even depression because your parents is very triggering or very oppressing or even victimizing you, right? But hence, we tell you that the only answer of this part of problems is the only, like, for example, medication or even psychology class, right? Because this part of thing is not only targeted to the patient, but it is also targeted to the external party, like parents. We are going to make them realize how important to be warm parents, right? Hence, their argument or urgency is not something matter in the day, right? But number two, they talking about, oh, this is the money donation. It is not going to be spent it more later if under opposition, right? We tell you not, because as a mental health activist, you are going to would like to care so much to your communal, right? You are going to so much care to your people who are on the ground that have mental health issue, right? In the end of the day, we are going to have more better accessibility because free therapy, free medication, for example, is something achievable under our at the house, right? So two things I'm going to speak. I'm going to talk in my speech. Number one, why it is not justified, and number two, in a practical level, right? Number one, why it is not justified. We tell you three layers. Number one, we tell you that this is not something feasible, right? Because it is only for brain injuries in the context, right? Right? Government bench have the burden to explain why scientific have would like to cooperate with mental health communities, for example, right? Or even the burden how it is going to be successful enough there, right? But even if it is successful, it is takes a very long time to do research, right? You waste your resources, you waste your time and energy, and you waste your money and capital in the end of the day, right? Because this is something that is very needs huge capital, right? You directly stimulate something like something in brain, for example, something in your mental or psychological heart, the things, right? This part of things you significantly allocated means you only focus for that. It is not only that. You won't also care to your mental health current status quo problems, like things like rumah asuh, for example, things like people are in the hospital of psychological, for example, you won't care for them because simply you shifting all the focuses for them, right? But comparatively, under our the house, we still care for the current context, like cheap medication, free therapy that is more targeted, and we give huge harm for a huge warm for them, right? But even if it is feasible, right, we tell you there is still trial and error because this is something that experiences, right? This is only a research, right? This is something a research. But if this part of things fail, it gives very huge harm because you only give hope to them, right? You only give hope to the family, for example, right? To the family, for example, right? Things like this, you cannot reverse about the harm that is caused by the governments at the house, right? But even if it is successful, it is going not to be accessible because this is the breakthrough research, right? This is a new research that you found in end of day, right? You are going to capitalize something because you would like to compensate what you have wasted to do it during the research, right? You are going to capitalize this. We will make it expensive. This is very bad because the problem currently of mental health issue, they don't want to go to the psychology class, they don't want to go to medication because the problem currently it is very expensive, right? In end of day, you won't answer the current context of problem because of the expensiveness. Hence, hence it is going to be bad. But moreover, the reason, for example, sorry to say, like people going to suicide is not it's people going to suicide because there is no alternative of current context they could go, right? Because something expensive, right? Hence, enough day under the house, you won't answer the current context problem, right? But comparatively, under the house, it is going to be better because conventional treatment, we are going to allocate more to something that is more giving communal boundaries, giving communal ties, right? We are going to allocate, for example, to psychological, medical, medication, and free therapy, right? This is better because we directly answer how we give the accessibility, giving accessibility, and it is going to be more cheaper, right? But second of all, this part of thing is already experienced thing, right? Because you already done for whole days in the current status quo, right? But not only that, we are going to also giving more awareness to external party, because in the context of mental health issue, you are not going to talk only to the individual level, but you also talking about external parties, like things like family, for example, things like your girlfriend, for example, or boyfriend, right? Under hours of the house, conventional treatment, we are going to urge them. We have urgency to them to say that this patient needs your help, needs your constant help, right? Needs your support or beloved warm hug, for example, right? This is important because this is the only legitimate way coming from the medication, coming from the psychology class that is accessed in current status quo, right? But comparatively, TDCS is only targeted to the individual. You cannot measure that external party might harm you, right? It is we are admit that it is something effective in ONDEV. We admit that it directly eradicating your depression, but doesn't guarantee for you you would like to go constant support, right? Because it is only targeted to the TDCS enough day, right? This leads to my second substantive material, why people under government are going to be reckless, right? Under government side, people are going to be reckless to the mental health issue. Like, for example, if you are get depression, for example, through your boyfriend, girlfriend, you just directly go to the TDCS and you back to that toxic relationship, right? But comparatively, under the house, it is going to be better because we admit to the some extent conventional way is hard to cure, right? But moment we cure them, we give them realize or even awareness that mental health issue is not something easy to cure. Mental health issue, you should keep them, right? You should make them healthy. For example, you should get a better relationship. You should get boyfriend or girlfriend that support you or family that loves you, right? So in the end of the day, we tell you that people on the individual level, they are not going to be reckless. They are not going to be reckless. But second of all, on the family level or communal level, we directly give them awareness, right? This is something exclusive of medication, of professional treatment. So proudly to close the opposition side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LO, for the speech. But before we go towards the DPM, just a quick warning. If you're going to talk about things that such as suicide and whatnot, please do try to be just a little bit more mindful in regards to how you package it or how you try to uh, talk about these kinds of sensitive issue. Maybe give a trigger warning and whatnot. So yeah, this is just a quick warning from me. So yeah, to continue on the case of the entire government bench, we will call on the Deputy Prime Minister. The floor is yours. Here.
Okay, not exactly sure if I'm gonna need a trigger warning, but just in case I slip into it, because I don't have directly noted down, yeah, trigger warning just in case I get a little bit too graphic. That being said, I'm going to be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Very quickly, rebuttal directly to opposition. First, when they talk about how mental health is also caused by environment or bullying, let's say, first of all, this is dismissive for everything we mentioned about how brain damage is problematic still, but I'm going to talk about that later and backing up my first speaker. But let's say the source is not brain damage. Let's say it is environment. The quick fix aspect of TDCS, where you go in, get a treatment, and you go out, is still going to be a very, very effective in 2 ways. Number one, it can directly fix whatever mental health problem you have in the status quo. Maybe you have depression and this will suppress that part of your brain. Maybe you have an addiction and maybe this will suppress that part of your brain. On our side of the house, you can help these people maintain mental acuity and focus so they can stay motivated rather than hits by getting hit by bouts of depression or mental exhaustion in their career, which makes them less likely to be bullied because now they are more productive. Second, on a social and relationship level, this keeps you more available. If you can get rid of that depression for a relatively long time, this will make it so your friends and family who we all want them to love us unconditionally. This will make them easier for them to love us. This is important because other people are also facing their personal demons, their own bouts with the disease that is called life. Having this fix makes you more available and more capable of keeping the people around you healthy. If opposition says maybe there's a bully that is attacking you, maybe your family is being abusive to you, if you have that depression, they're just going to continuously bully you. If you can fix that, you can have this self-confidence and ability to make yourself more composed and able to speak up against them, rather than not only having to face the fear of speaking up to your family, but also a clinical depression in your brain. So important thing here is, number one, we still help you in your career because it's the basic source of living income. If you have problems in your workplace, this will help you. Same thing with school. Secondly, your relationships and social connections are also maintained on our side. Important because there's a support system regardless of mental health. I think opposition admits to this, but we help you keep the pathway to make sure that those people around you can be more likely to help you. As much as we want it, even if you know someone really, really loves you, if you're being incredibly clinically depressed, super anxious and unable to communicate in a healthy way, and you maybe lash out at them and are angry at them because you don't have control over your brain chemistry, they might leave you, and that's the worst case scenario. Second, when they talk about external help, like societal level, we say separate from mental health activists, being a good person is being pushed by other activists and other members of society. Number one, in work context, for the effectivity or a good workplace environment, there's already a lot of on-the-job training and culture training in careers to make sure people are working effectively. Second, in a relationship context, many feminists and a lot of men are also still advocating to stop toxicity. Is not exclusive to just mental health activists. As any feminists, they also want to stop toxicity. That can work together along with us. In family context, not just mental health activist work, but there's also things like child protective services that will stop abusive parents and try to prevent all of this from happening. So this is not a vacuum debate where we only want TDCS or we want the solutions from opposition. We're talking about specifically there are a lot of solutions in society, and where do the mental health activists focus their resources on? So something that further responses. Opposition says we have to cooperate with medical industry. It's hard. This is the same as opposition. If you want to get medication, you also have to cooperate parallel. Second, opposition says it's all accessible. Not at all true. We're at the same position where the distribution and accessibility is still trying to be developed. Thirdly, they say it's a trial and error process. No, this is more than just a research paper. It's already on the way. The context slide says that the technology is there. We're just considering more implementation. And secondly, obviously it's trial and error. Opposition is also trial and error. You don't just go to a therapy and then go out of one session and be done. It could take a long time. Same thing with medication, same thing with self-love. It's not an instant fix. And if they say, we only give hope, you also only give hope. Look at my prime minister talking about how therapy is super case-based. If it's physical, you cannot fix it. Even if you want to try and talk through it, it still depends on the personality of the people taking the therapy. If you have a conservative upbringing, it is hard for you to share and pour your heart out to a psychologist or a therapist. So it's still difficult for you to get that. Same thing with medication. It could even cause an addiction if you get too reliant on those medication. It's hope that is costly. On top of that, self-love is also hijacked. So the idea of self-love is not as good as what opposition says. Then when they say we cannot reverse the harm, that's why we research it first before we make it to a wide market. So this is not an exclusive problem either. So that being said, I'm going to move on to my extension talking about how the what the TDCS is versus conventional treatment as far as the development and their distribution. Because I think separate from just the effectivity of this as the concept, we need to actually talk about this in a macro level as well to engage with opposition. So number one, it's definitely parallel. The pathway to development on both sides. On both sides, we are trying to make it more accessible. On both sides, we are trying to make it more effective. So everything will take time. This is not a harm that opposition can say they escape from, because therapy is not that easy either. But what is exclusive on government? Number one, we work together with other industries and also the medical industry. We have to be real here. We need to be good and attractive as a activist to make sure we have a lot of partners. Number one, why does TDCF have a lot more stakeholders? Namely, athletes and the sports complex. Second, the military industry complex for their soldiers who want to fix brain damage and things like PTSD. Thirdly, the physical labor movements and unions. We need to be able to work together. We can work together with all of this because they are a huge industry that can gain a lot of benefits from the TDCS, because brain injuries are super common in those industries. That being said, this means that the development here has a good outlook and it will be developed and distributed sooner than later. So we need to work together with them so we can actually cooperate with them. And distribution is the same. On top of that, every hospital pretty much will want to take this device. So because it's not a specialized product, it's an all-in-one tool. So we need to help them develop it faster and advocate for them faster. But what is the most important thing here? If we advocate for this, especially significantly, we then gain the inherent capability of making it more accessible, because just like with every other technology, TDCS is likely to have something called patents. If we have the resources being poured into the TDCS development, we are able to have access to these patents. Maybe we don't fully own it. Maybe we only partially own it, but we have at least some control over it. Because let's be honest, the outlook in 20 years is that TDCS will be developed, regardless of us being helpful or not. But if we don't help them or involve with them right now as mental activists, that is going to be the worst case scenario, because the TDCS will be developed and will become extremely expensive and inaccessible. What is the parallel case? Look at insulin prices in the US. When it was developed, the government allowed the private sector to completely take care of it. No cheap health activists were able to wanted to participate in the development of it, and now it is insanely expensive and inaccessible. If we participate, sure, we're not going to get the full patents, but we at least could be part of the development and either keep track of its development or advocate for the development of it and the sharing of it to make it more affordable as well. So the conclusion here is that we understand that this is a trade-off, but our trade-off is important because in the future, to make sure that it can be accessible, to prevent all of the harms that opposition says, we need to have a stake in it right now. If we don't, it will be developed anyway, and this very crucial, important solution will become inaccessible in their world, while at least on our side, we have access to that. For all those reasons, proud to propose.
Thank you so much, second speaker, for their speech. We call on the second speaker of UP. The floor is yours. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible and clear.
Okay, thank you. Let me drink first. I'm very sorry for the sound. Ow, my eyes. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. I remember one of my friends that was Rukia multiple times just because he has a very anxious person. I myself come from a very religious family that would go on a route if anything happened. We think that this is the state of the world that they has yet to actually see. The state of the world where people are not necessarily going to be aware of mental health. And that is the biggest problems, one of the biggest problems that we are currently trying to say that we need to actually increase the self-awareness. Right? We think that that kind of trying to tackle in problems like that is very crucial in order for any of their promotions of trying to self-brain damage and something like that could actually work, right? Just like the World Food Organizations are not trying to research superfood to give people to be super strong, they're focused more on giving to those who doesn't have access to it. For example, like we think our main concern is to not only solve mental health issue, but also think that the having mental state, having healthy mental state, is something that is a human right and anyone deserves to have at the end of the day. Right? Few clarifications, right? And then that the governments don't really understand that we are trying to say that there are our stance as an opposition. We believe that there are so many dimensions of trying to take care of mental health issues that we think like trying to spread awareness of mental health, for example, so that people will not going to have huge skepticism towards this method, for example, or trying to promote mental health from the side of normal human life, for example. They're trying to like minute by saying that we're just going to go around and trying to socialize to people and something like that. We don't think that it is we don't think that that is that small, right? We think that most of our works were going to be hard, and we think that that is the most important way for us to do it. Secondly, they're trying to say they are already people that are trying to promote being good. For example, like there are feminists or labor forces that are trying to make good workshop, right? But this is very important for the mental health community to actually opting into it, because the problems are mental health problems, right? If feminists, for example, were trying to solve like trying to be toxic, at the end of the day, the only possible way for them to actually look at it is to look at it from the feminist point of view, or like just trying to be a strong woman, right? This is about being woman, or trying to, let's say, being labor, or let's say the workforce, for example. Let's say you need to be cooperative because you need to have profit, for example. These are the type of things that were more likely going to happen if you just let it happen by other communities. It is really important for us to take in and trying to say that this is also some sort of mental health problems and need to be seen from psychiatry or psychology's point of view, for example. This is why it's very important, and because of this importance, right, we think that our community exists to begin with. If it is not that important, our community wouldn't exist to begin with. Secondly, and thirdly, self-confidence. What they're trying to say that, well, this was going to give self-confidence to the people that were going to have something like anxiety and something like that. Like they were going to go with family that are very, very toxic and they can just go with it. If that is true, right, then what the heck is the difference between that and trying to be very addicted to medications at the end of the day? They will still need to go to that place again and again at the end of the day without actually solving the problems at the end of the day, right? We think that the other dimensions that really need to be pointed out and need to be actually solved at the end of the day. These, by trying to minuten this problem, is the very fact that they're not really understanding what the mental health community actually has. Okay, let's talk about the rebuttals, right? Like, they say that this is a physical brain damage that we need to focus on. Yes, there are cases like that, and we're very sorry for it. But we don't think that that is actually the most majority cases that is happening right now. Many people are suffering from mental health issues that are currently existence, or people are just really need to fix it, for example, in their way of thinking. It's not necessarily physical. For example, I'm an anxious person, right? What my doctor promotes to me is to change my way of thinking, for example, trying to think my anxious in a longer period of time. Is it really that significant in my 60 years of life, for example? Something like this is very common because lifestyle currently are not really, really good. People are being forced to work 9 to 12 hours a day, looking at their boss, for example, or even just going onto social media, looking at other people having better life, right? This is the type of stuff that most people actually suffering on, right? We think of, again, we're very sorry if that thing's happening, but we think that that is very, very specific case that they're trying to say, like car accident or something like that. But even if it is actually a case that is rampant, we think that exactly because if it is a brain damage, there are already existence method, for example, just go to other part that we're going to take care in to the brain damage society, for example. Like we don't really necessarily have to go into the mental community that trying to focus on this type of stuff at the end of the day, right? Even if it's going to be coming to us, we're still going to have, again, medications and something like that that could help us ease their pain at the end of the day. Like, it's not like there are no method to help them at the end of the day. We think there are so many other ways. Just go to the brain damage department, right? But let's say that it's going to be successful. Like, even if it's going to be successful, is how they say it, right? One, again, we think solving mental health issue is something that is not one-dimensional, right? The source of the problem, like the circle, friends, loved one, could be the source of something that could amplify the state to begin with, right? This is what externality the PM mentioned at the end of the day, right? At the very least, on our side, we think that we acknowledge this type of stuff, and we think that the mental state and the mental health point of view and dimensions need to be focused on, not just point of view of feminists or point of view of your work. We think that it is very important to underlining that this is a mental health issue, and you need to take care of this because people are suffering at the end of the day, right? Suffering at the end of the day. But secondly, they're trying to say, well, this is going to be very accessible when there are patents and something like that. We don't think so, right? Because even if there are already research about that, like, that doesn't mean there wouldn't going to be any further research that would going to need trial and error at the end of the day. That is not how research that's not how research do, right? We think that their idea, right, is that we if we could do this, we could do this, we're going to be able to have blah, 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 right? But we think that it's going to require huge fund. That's why the motion state significant fund that are required, right, at the end of the day. We think that it's going to create very near and inaccessible method at the end of the day, right? We think that that is not a good way to do it. Not only that, like the professional, for example, the expert that needs to do it, for example, or even equipment in order to do so will going to be very expensive. We don't think, even if it is existent, we're most likely going to be rich people that can access this, or it can only actually happening in developing countries where they can afford that at the end of the day. But even if there is going to be certain access to developing countries, right, it is important because the people believe in mental health is not necessarily existent, right? So even if the medication exists, the people are still going to be skeptical towards it and making it useless at the end of the day. If people still believe in ruqyah at the end of the day, people are still going to choose that. This is why it is not just a one-dimensional problem at the end of the day, right? This is why our side is going to be way better, right? Even in the research department, right? We did that by actually trying to promote mental health, by trying to say that this is something that people are suffering every single day. Your mother, your son, everyone could actually be harmed by this at the end of the day. We're going to get more support. And at that time, we were more likely going to have more funding and taking risks in this type of research at the end of the day, right? It is going to be way more powerful for us to get those funding at the end of the day. But not only that, people are going to be more and more open to methods like this at the end of the day. Even in many different countries, medications for mental health issues are pretty much questionable to us because people are very skeptical towards modern what we call mental health in modern society at the end of the day. Like the very fact that pasung is a very real thing, we don't think that it is something that needs to be minutely point out, right? Going on to my extensions, it's not going to be that long. We think that the very least, we think that it is going to be very harmful to the people that already exist in our mental health like community, right? Because many of the people are in our mental health community are the people who come from the bottom that really realize that this is something that can spread. This is something that can happen towards everyone. For example, I have that kind of background, for example, right? By actually trying to say to the mental health community, no, I don't give a shit about you guys that are happily living in developing countries. We're going to solve into this very minority cases and trying to solve their problem at the end of the day, even though there are already other department or medication that can actually use this. This is a very fact why the government cannot actually win, because they're never trying to prove to us why is it that is very, very that important, even though there are already current methods. For example, why is it that we need to point out and just dismiss the importance of awareness of the mental health state? Why is it that people why is it that our community exists to begin with? We think that what the other communities cannot just take in their point of view. Because of those reasons and how the government actually don't understand how our communities are built upon, how mental state needs to be solved, and how this brain damage is not necessarily a really huge problem they've been taken care of by the mental health society. We proud to oppose.
Thank you so much for the speech. The second up, may we call on the government whip or the third of affirmative to close the entire substantive of side government. The floor is yours. Here.
Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Perfect. I'm starting my speech in three. Sorry. Starting my speech in 3, 2. It's regretful that side negative made this debate harder to judge. Let me help you clarify things on how this debate should be judged, right? First context. What is the actual problem that side negative fails to understand? This is something that Delphi and Aya has successfully nuanced, but let's talk about this, right? Why do we talk about brain damage so much? Because the thing about mental health issues, what mental health activists concern so much, comes in 2 forms. Number 1, it usually comes in form of brain damage first that manifests into mental deterioration. We are talking about perhaps you could be born with it, perhaps it could be due to some sort of trauma and yada yada. We are talking about schizophrenia, we are talking about bipolar disorder, we are talking about psychopathy, for example, or sociopathy, where literally your brain cannot produce the hormones that makes you emotional, and hence you are unable to be empathetic and you are unable to actually
ke-mute?
Kak,
Halo. Oh
Kak
shit.
Andre, sorry, tadi ke-mute, Kak.
For like 5 seconds.
Check,
Yeah.
check, 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 check.
It's around 5 seconds. Tadi I stop hearing you you are unable to feel sensitive and emotional gitu.
Okay, hello, am I audible now?
Yes, you're audible now, Kak.
Cukup jelas kan ya?
Yeah, I'll add 5 seconds to your speech later ya.
Okay, cool. So, restarting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Yeah, that's basically the psychopathy, sociopathy. That's the conclusion is that's brain damage first, that comes into mental deterioration. But second context is that if they want to talk about trauma of environment, your parent sucks, your friend sucks, your environment sucks, you are getting ruqyah. I'm so sorry if this happens to you. I really do. However, how does it translate into the fact that they say that mental health is not one-dimensional? It's regretful that they are the one being one-dimensional in this debate, because they only talk about the psychological aspect of the mental health issue in this debate, because they literally talk about, oh, we need to give hugs, we need to spread awareness to these individuals. No, literally the trauma the environment gives you damage your brain to the extent, for example, if you're depressed, if you're constantly being anxious of your work, for example, if you're being depressed of your life due to your parents, for example, that literally ruins your brain's capability to produce certain hormones, down to the extent that you will be over-reliant to medications, to pills that literally generates dopamine for you. That's the kind of environment that translates into brain damage. That's why in the sense of mental health activists, mental health issue as a whole, we are not only talking about, oh, you need to self-love, you need to love yourself, you need to understand each other. This is a much bigger problem than that, because majority of our victims, of our fellow members, are literally the ones suffering from years of chronic clinical depression, for example, or for example, suffering for long-term schizophrenia that literally cripples their ability to live, for example. That's context number one. Context number two, let's talk about the big, oh yeah, it's basically a big story of mental health, intertwined. Framing number one, let's talk, what if, by that sense of context, what does this mean then? This means if they want to talk about, okay, we need to create communal ties, awareness from others, that they need to be hugged, they need to self-love, and so on and so forth. First of all, this is dismissive to Batara's analysis on why this does not work. This is dismissive to Delphi's analysis on over-reliance. Number two, they need to be consistent. Which one they want to pursue? They want to, first speaker said the progress for this conventional method is there, but suddenly number two said that, oh, we don't have that, we still have ruqyah, and so on and so forth. Clarify this. But number three, let's talk about this, right? Because I really, really, really wish that hug and self-love can cure depression. As someone who has been suicidal since 6 years old, as someone who has suffered from depression due to environment and friendship since like SMP, it really sucks, and I really on the verge of giving up. And another layer of this being sucks is that I have to be over-reliant on meds. The moment I stop taking my meds because perhaps it's too expensive and it's not NUDC and SBC season yet, so I do not have any money, that's the moment I am on my lowest. The conclusion is this. This is why we propose TDCS. This is why we want to pursue for permanent solution that actually have potentials to cure these individuals, to actually cure and not mitigate the damage through self-love and medication. But what do they say against this? They say that this gives false hope. This is not a false hope because it has degree of success. We said to you that in the context like TDCS is no longer a dream machine, like assuming feasibility machine, but this is actually an existing technology that we are currently experimenting with the implementation. For example, implementation towards schizophrenia, towards ABC problems, for example. But number two, even if it's a false hope, I think false hope for the broken and those who have given up life because they have gone uncured for years, it's a marginally better benefit, right? But number three, we have talked to you that there another problem is that, oh, people become reckless. They will go to TDCS when they have depression. Okay, this is saying that, oh, this is an argument for any medical advancement ever, because like TDCS is not something off the counter, right? You will go to psychiatrist, you will go to neurologist consultation, and so on and so forth. There will be complemented by psychoanalysis as well. I don't see why this argument should stand, right? But number three, their biggest case coming from second is that we need to raise self-awareness, yada, yada, yada. First of all, awareness and campaign is part of research. It's literally communication of science. We literally do not want to make something that people do not use, right? Number two, the current problem with your campaign is threefold. First, people do not believe in the science of psychotherapy. These are in the individuals that think that Rukiah is the same as psychotherapy and so on and so forth. This will be different when we actually, this will actually be different when we have TDCS, when we have told you that, okay, the problem is in your brain. It's actually very scientific. We have hopes to cure them. But number three, another problem on this is that most of the time, family and victims are giving up. They have given up meds because it's too expensive. They have given up going to therapy because they have gone to therapy for 3 to 4 years and there are no improvements. They're still having anxiety attacks. They are still having depressions chronically. These are what is going to change under our set of doubts. In the grand scheme of things, Batara also have analysis on why then we also need to push why then as a mental health activist, we actually need to pull our resources now, because in the absence of us doing this, the big pharmaceutical companies will monopolize the technology, the patent, the expertise, the doctors, and so on and so forth. In the next long run, we are left with drain sink. Literally, we are burning money for subsidizing medications because it literally takes forever for everyone. While at the same time, the technology of TDCS that actually can cure people is gatekept by the big pharmaceutical companies. What we have told to you today, we have told to you, number one, the context of what mental health activists should concern about, because the framing is simple. If it's two different problems on the government opposition side of the house, then it's a prioritization problem, right? Now, the priority is those who have living their life chronically suffering, right? Under our set of guys, those are the people who are more vulnerable and have the chance to actually be solved. We propose.
Thank you so much for the speech. Third of affirmative to close the entire substantive of side negative, third negative. The floor is yours. Here.
Cocok, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Wait. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. To clarification, we agree that in both sides, I think that we, in both sides, we agree that patient has brain damage. I believe.
I'm sorry, Dimas. I think tadi my signal was agak error. I couldn't hear you in like the first 5 to 10 seconds. Is it okay kalau ulang?
Oke. Sekarang audible nggak? Halo.
Yeah, audible.
Okay. First of all, trigger warning everyone. I do not intentionally offend you. So if I really offend you, I apologize for that. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. To clarification, I think that both sides agree that patients have the brain damage, regardless they are psychologically or they are psychologically or physically, right? I believe even if we talk about brain damage, it doesn't mean that we should do TDCS at the end of the day, which a government bench define it by saying that the context right saying that there is a brain injury and it is solved by TDCS. No, it is not right, because we also under our side of house, we are going to have those people with that brain injury, brain damage, with having this kind of conventional treatment in the end of the day. So they need to compare why then this conventional treatment is not going to solve that brain damage. Second of all, the second clarification is that Rukia, in my DLO argumentation, is to prove that there are another mechanism that people right now do, which it's very bad for this patient of the day. That is why you should allocate more and more to correct those people, your family, your friend, to do, to help these people more by having this conventional treatment, by help them to go to the psychologist, for example, not to do the ruqyah in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Under the house, you will not have this kind of effort because you are going to fully allocate your resources to the development of TDCS without correcting those people in the day, which they never respond on that, why then your family and friend is going to be better under your house. Three things in my speech, which first of all, which one is more visible to be manifested. This will also answer why then the conventional treatment is going to be fulfilled the interest of mental health activists. To rebuttal. First rebuttal, they told you that when they do this, they are going to do the research for researchers, significantly allocate the money and time. And at the same time, they are also going to maintain free therapy and reduce it. They keep it because there is effectivity on conventional treatment. This is what PM told you. Several reasoning why then it is not okay. First of all, I think that this can be the case, right? If government bench, in government bench, you need to fully define why okay to allocate your resources to the TDCS. This debate is comparison debate and it is mutually exclusive. In order to benefit on TDCS to fly, you need to define why then it is okay to fully allocating to TDCS in the today, right? We said that it is not, it is bad to develop because it takes a long time to do. The question under gov bench, whether it is okay, right? We don't want to waste our time for something that is not necessarily 100 successful. We agree that there is a degree of successfulness, but the question that becomes whether it is okay to waste our time to do the trial and error, right? Because time is very sensitive when we talk about mental health issue. You cannot predict what happens next. Moreover, we are living in a pandemic situation, for example, right? Many people are suffering just because of staying at home. How do you let them suffer more and more? I don't know why then you will have the time to do the research and let these people to suffer in their houses, right? This is not the interest of mental health activists because your prior agenda is to help and to protect those people in need. Therefore, in finding your success of good and successful TDCS, they know the trade-off whether it is okay to abandon those people in suffer. There is no answer for the government bench whether it is okay to trade off the time and also energy to help these people in the end of the day. Ladies and gentlemen. Second of all, even if that is not the case, right, there will be divided focus on which one that you are going to prioritize first in the end of the day under PM speech. Because as mental health activists, you are not going to utilize your resources from the donation, from the donor that have depended their life in you. You are not going to utilize those fully because you are going because the output of that is going to be not not fully, right, because you are at the same time you want to have the DCS, but to some extent you are also going to have the free therapy like what PM told you. I don't understand why the output of those things is going to be manifested good under of the house. Furthermore, I don't understand also why then there is urgency for mental health activists to develop the DCS, which rather it is going to be expensive, where conventional treatment is still effective and accessible for our member and our patient that we are going to protect in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Because we think that the problem of mental health activists with mental health issue, it is not looking which one is very effective, right? But patient awareness and willingness to be cured, and also not being denial with their mental health issue, mental health condition. That is the most important things, right? It is therefore you cannot put more solvency with having the DCS because you will make these people to be reluctant to check themselves because of the accessibility of technology in and of the day. So therefore, accessibility of technology and high prices and also expensive treatment will be existed under of the house, which later it is not feasible for you to have TDCS, right? Their defense on accessibility is to tell you that as mental health activists, you will give them subsidy. The question then becomes whether the donor will subsidize you when my DLO has told you that the donor does not like it and developing the DCS is going to betray the trust of the donor in the end of the day, right? Even if there is a trust, I don't also understand why the mental health activist is able to maintain the subsidy sustainably to the patient in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, because it is not going to be sustainable anyway. Because this is a breakthrough research, right? It is a breakthrough finding that you need to sustainably and also sustainably do in the end of the day to protect your passion to protect your member, so it needs more and more money to sustain it, means that you are going to make those people to suffer more and more and cannot sustainably, because you are not going to sustainably help them in a play. What is the comparative? My LO has told you that the comparative is better because allocating to conventional treatment means that you are going to focus right now. It means under of the house, when you have the money, you are going to have free therapy for everyone, for example, free medication for everyone. This is better because the scope of these people to be protected it's much more bigger, which is a lot of people are going to go to the free therapy because it is free, because this is it will not burden them and they do not think about the prices or the money that they are going to have in a play. That is the moment that should be the tipping point. Why then you are going to have more and helping more and more people should be the tipping point, and it is the full interest of this mental health activists. Moreover, they taught you, right? Secondly, Battle told you that trial and error, because DPM champion is basing that in both sides there is trial and error, therefore the harm under op is not exclusive. Within that, DPM cannot say that you have the technology because the technology is being developed in the way that it has not been developed yet, but whether or not you want to develop it as a mental health activist. Therefore, the trial and error under the gov bench is likely because there has no guarantee and successful cases in having TDCS. In comparative, the conventional treatment is not using trial and error again. We have reached the progress and the result. It has been commercialized even, right? This trial and error has been done years ago. Moreover, in conventional treatment, it has been handled by the expert. The expert has many, right? It is not considered as a trial and error. It has been a successful breakthrough in our play. That is why we tell you that it is not okay for you to have the DCS, and because it does not fulfill the interest of mental health activists. Second clash, whether the DCS is going to be harmful for the mental health activists and the one that we want to protect, right? They told you that it's going to protect the patient, which I believe that it is in instant way. One thing for sure, they never engage to is about the family and friends that need also to be corrected to support and to have this family identity. My LO has told you that we are better because we are going to correct your family and your friend, for example, to help you and protect you, because we're focusing on conventional treatment. It is not only to help you internally, but also externally in the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. That is why we think that it is going to be better on the side of the house because you are going to be supported. Their defense on that is that other people will not believe in you because you do not believe in science. Within that, people right now have belief in mental health issue, and many campaign in social media, many campaign in our street, even government also acknowledge it. Exactly when TDCS is that effective to help those people, we think that it will make people believe in, and you make people believe in it because of TDCS. There is the moment when people are going to trivialize that mental health. This is bad because there is no closure for these people in of today. Because there is no closure, there is no help for these people in of today because this is other people were going to trivialize the mental health issue, and we think that this is bad.
Thank you so much, the op web for the speech. To close the entire case of side opposition, may we call on the op reply. The floor is yours. You're here.
Check. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We tell you that mental health activists that they want to heal or cure their passion, for example, or their people on the ground, for example, right? But we tell you that the biggest interest of mental health activists is that they would like to give. Yeah.
Op reply. Kayaknya internet gue lagi error lagi tadi, jadi kayak nggak kedengaran Samsung for the first 5 seconds or 7 seconds tadi. Bisa diulang lagi nggak ya? I'm so sorry, there's something wrong.
Dari awal ya, Kak?
Iya, nggak apa-apa kan?
Oh ya,
Sorry ya.
Iya, nggak apa-apa. Okay, starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. We tell you that mental health activists is that they would like to cure or help the people, right? But the biggest interest of mental health activists is that they would like to give social attachment and towards emotional, right? This is very important since LO and DO concept that there is still dimensional problems, right? But if you talk about something brain injury, something that harm towards your brain, for example, there is still the department that still focuses upon health right, the doctor, for example. Then the question then become, it is the biggest interest of mental health activists to contribute or even try to be the part of that? No, ladies and gentlemen, because we tell you that this is not the interest of them, right? Two loopholes of government side, right? They dismisses of the idea of dimensional problems. They only talk about idea of brain injury. Then hence we consider that brain injury is something also problematic. But we tell you that it could be coaxed with the idea of other departments that the LO said. But number two, they're only playing on the best case scenario that it is only going to be accessible, for example, and yeah, it is going to be accessible, right? Two mappings in my speech. Number one, in the idea of justification, they tell you that, oh, they are not going to be bullied, for example, in the external parties because they have self-confidence. What the LO tells you that self-confidence will be reversed or even will be back because the external party will see you as an old version, not a new version, right? But number two, traumatizing or trauma it's going to make you traumatic, right? Because people still keep bullying you, then it gives you more traumatized, and you still remember what they did in the past, right? So in the end of the day, what self-confidence that is going to be accessed under government side is not likely or exclusive, right? Hence, under the house, it is going to be better. Not only we try to cure or help, make them healthy from the internal resource because we give them medication, even it is a little progress, but we still appreciate it because we try to inflate it. But number two, we still also give awareness to the external party. It is very that is a main resource of you to have this part of mental health issue, right? So in the end of the day, on the principle level, we tell you it is more important exclusive under opposition, right? But number two, in the idea of practical, right? They tell you that, oh, we are going to give them efficacy, for example, and give them accessible, right? We tell you that even it is accessible, it's going to be bad because on the idea of accessibility, for example, they are going to be more addictive, for example, or going to be reckless, right? Because they easily thinks that TDCS is the instant way to get to cure mental health. They won't care to the mental health issue. They won't care to the idea of depression because simply, oh, this is the instant way to get cured. So in the end of the day, I don't need to care to my mental health issue, right? But number two, the ideal movement is not only for targeted to the one patient, for example, or internal part of your individual, right? But it is also impacted to the environment, how echo chamber would like to react on you. This is very exclusive since LN opposition web concept that the external parties also more important, right? So in the end of the day, we tell you this is very exclusive. This is very exclusive, and yeah, this is very exclusive. But lastly, on the idea of commercialization, for example, and idea of commercialization, for example, it is going to be bad, right? Because under this of the house, you wouldn't make it high prices, for example, because under this of the house, it is a breakthrough. It is new experiences, right? So in the day, people on the ground would not access it, right? So people on the ground still suffer. At least under the house, we are going to make it cheaper, for example. We are going to make more accessible medication, for example, right? So at least even it is a little progress, but it gives direct impact to them without waiting under government right? Right? Because we tell you that mental health is time sensitive, what we consider, then in the end of the day, we tell you that current progress is something okay, and we consider for that. So based on two maps, things I'm proud to close the debate, close the speech. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Op Reply, for the speech. To close this entire debate, we call on the Gov Reply. The floor is yours. Here.
Okay, just checking. Am I audible? Clear.
Yes, Kak, you're audible. Tapi
Okay.
nanti kalau tiba-tiba ada yang error, I'll stop you lagi, Zul, ya.
Okay, got it. Okay, I'm going to be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Clarification: when we talk about brain damage in government, it isn't like you literally just get your head caved in and you got a huge damage. It's the nuanced, minute deviation from a healthy brain, all set up from Prime Minister and especially clarified in government whip. Mind you, we admit that it's not just from there the mental health problems, but these have been framed as the most vulnerable cases because they're the most unsolvable cases, because from the Prime Minister, we told you why all of their conventional solutions are not effective. So even if obsess is not the majority case, we're running on the framing that is the most vulnerable and unsolvable. Metrics for the debate. Number one, feasibility of development and distribution, because I think as far as pure effectivity, you can deadlock that, and I'll try to push it to break that deadlock, but that's the most important metric. Secondly, our role as mental health activists, not just picking TDCS versus conventional solutions. So what are the crucial problems with opponents' case? Number one, in LO, they talk about how it is already very effective and accessible, which we tell you is not true or likely, but most importantly, their DLO and their UpWhip agrees with actually strays from the LO's characterization. They take us back to the early 2000s where Rukia and Pasong is still the majority case. Even then, we already engaged with this from the PM setup. It's not just we just pick up and leave everything we have made, but we strategically allocate. We won't uproot therapists. We don't fire all advocates in rural areas either. Opposition is really trying to strawman our case here. And beyond that, on government side of the house, we already told you that part of the TDCS development is selling the idea of TDCS and its technology. The basic idea of mental health awareness and getting away from dangerous solutions is part of the TDCS advocacy. Even in their UpWhip, they also admit that the end of their speech that the government already admits that mental health problem is there and there's a lot of progress. That is to say that their most urgent case is something that is no longer true and no longer that relevant, or even if it is relevant, is still solved in government side. And when they said that it's not one-dimensional to solve mental health problems, we already also engage with that. On the work aspect, we help you recover quicker and you are going to be healthier for a long time. And socially, we keep you composed and more capable of working with society or speaking up. Imagine trying to talk to your family or your bullies and you don't even have a solution like the TDCS. Our strongest response to opposition is number one, we told you how other activists can cooperate with us to help the societal issues. Their only response is, again, it's going to be one-dimensional if the feminists talk about toxic relationships. But why is this a harm? If we still get the results of people being nicer, if we still get the solution of stopping toxic relationships, even if it's not within the scope of mental health problems, it's still solved. So although what they say happens, it's not true that it's a harm. They never concluded it that way. Second, when it comes to cost being inaccessible, literally all the same is there. We parallel this in DPM and GovWhip so much on how it is still not that accessible anyway from opposition. So their fight isn't as easy. And if it is accessible on opposition, then there's no urgency there, while our solution is newer and more important. The nuance here is that our side is going to be solving a more important issue. Beyond that, we already told you that conventional problems are not that effective, how therapy is not that easy if you cannot speak up, how meds are not that accessible either, and how self-love can be hijacked. No response, by the way. So it's parallel on the cost at worst, and at best, we give you a more reliable solution compared to them. Our most important arguments then is number one, the permanence and the immediacy of this technology. On government side of the house, we already told you that this is not going to be just a off-the-counter solution. It's something that requires consultation and actual measurement before you take it, so it's not going to be addicting as what opposition says, a straw man here. And secondly, on the idea of long-term analysis, we told you that if they say brain damage can be fixed by other solutions, we told you we still have to be involved, especially in my extension, talking about how we need to be involved in the development. Otherwise, it will become inaccessible in the future and the insulin problem will repeat again. Why we should win this debate? Number one, we provided to you a very vulnerable context of brain damage that isn't a rare thing, and even when it's rare, it's the most vulnerable. Secondly, we provide to you the most engaging case looking at the effectivity of upside as well as the cost involved. Thirdly, we provided the unique macro analysis of keeping the TDCS within the grasp of mental health activists rather than letting it go and having another insulin problem happening. For all those reasons, very proud to propose.